Good evening. I'm Mike Smith, and I'm joined by Barbara White. Thank you for joining us tonight at News 10. Tonight, we bring you an interesting story. Today marks 25 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall.
To keep Western fascists from entering East Germany, the GDR started to build a barbed wire barricade on August 13, 1961. The barricade was eventually built up into a solid concrete wall, completely separating East and West Berlin.
The Berlin Wall stood until November 9, 1989, 28 years after first being built. Now, we'll go to our reporters Daisy Blackwell and Connie Chang in Berlin to tell you more.
Thank you, Mike. On that November night, the head of the East Germany Communist Party accidentally spoke of the allowance of travel across the border, setting the fall of the Berlin Wall into motion.
When the news of free travel got to the public, many people swarmed the wall, and some even brought picks and hammers to start tearing down the wall. That was one of the most powerful symbols of the Cold War.
Now let's take a look at a clip from the timeline of the Berlin Wall.
Before the Berlin Wall came about, Nazi Germany originally allied with Communist Russia and also had a totalitarian system. After World War II, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, and Franklin D. Roosevelt met and discussed the separation of Germany into 4 zones of occupation.
What's your proposition for an agreement? Well, Mr. Stalin, we feel since you have discarded and broken agreements made with the United States and Britain, that Germany needs to unconditionally surrender.
We've decided that Germany shall be split into 4 sectored zones controlled by us 3 countries in France.
In turn, Stalin was promised the return of lands lost to Japan in the Russo-Japanese War.
The western section of Berlin was capitalist and under the control of the United States, whereas the eastern section was communist-controlled society.
Although Germany was already split into 4 sectors, the split of Berlin added more separation, making it like an island. After that split, the Eastern Berliners blockaded all of Western Berlin, causing the Berlin Airlift. That all eventually led to the construction of the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was guarded 24/7 after it was built by GDR officers.
The officers guarding the wall shot anyone trying to get over and usually arrested them if they were not killed.
Once people heard the news, they tried for days to tear down the wall by hand, and eventually succeeded, allowing free travel across the border.
Thousands of East Germans came across the border today, perhaps more than 100,000, so many that border police lost count. And at every border crossing, thousands of West Germans there to say, welcome.
There were many impacts on the people of Berlin because of this issue which changed their lives forever. Families were separated by the building of the wall and were unable to see each other until the fall in 1989. People who worked in the Western Berlin were no longer allowed to see their Eastern Berlin families. The senseless issue of democracy versus communism caused the families to never see each other again in some cases.
There are many ways that people tried to cross in the beginning. Many climbed through unprotected gaps in the barricade. Once they were covered, people resorted to sewer systems, empty apartment buildings, and simply climbing over the Berlin Wall. Even though they knew that there wasn't a good chance of going over, they still took the shots from the guards anyway.
Gunter Litwin was the first victim who was shot down by East German border guards in Berlin on August 24, 1961. He was shot down because he was the first person to climb over the wall, or attempted to.
After reuniting with Germany, the Communist Party was still very influential. In the East, employment was through state-owned companies. Unemployment rose and West Germans were angry that the taxes increased. Taxes increased to help the Eastern economy.
America was greatly affected by the fall of the Berlin Wall. America was no longer needing to have a military as large as we did after the Cold War. United States service levels in Europe were reduced to less than a quarter of what we needed during the Cold War. America was left as the only superpower.
After the Berlin Wall fell, some Germans wanted pieces of the wall to stay up as a memorial. The Brandenburg Gate, which was known for division of Berlin, also watchtowers and small pieces of the wall were preserved.
Thank you, Daisy, Connie, and Barbara. Quite the interesting story we had tonight. We at News 10 hope you enjoyed the story we had for you and are more aware of the issue of the Berlin Wall during the Cold War. I'm Mike Smith, and have a good night.
Thank you, Mike. On that November 9th, the head of the East Germany Communist Party accidentally spoke of the allowance of the travel.
Good evening, I'm Mike Smith, and I'm joined here with Barbara White. And tonight we have an interesting story for you here at News 10 Now. Tonight we have
There were many ways that people tried to cross in the beginning. Many climbed through the unprotected gaps in the barricade. Once they were covered, people resorted to the empty sewer buildings.
So what's your proposition for an agreement?
Well, Mr. Stalin, we feel since you have discarded and broken agreements made with the United States and Britain.
Sadie? Please. Well, we're trying to film something for a project and all of a sudden have a little click, 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 click.
I thought that was Aaron. I was going to say, does he want to die today?
Does he want to die today?
I'm going to hit him with the bean sack thing on the door. Speaking of that thing, my dog used to have this bell thing. He would ring when he had to go out, and he would just want to go out.
Yeah. We calm ourselves, calm ourselves, calm ourselves.
Chandler!
Get my chair out!